These are the 5 players in fantasy football that you need to let your idiot league mates draft in 2024. You cannot pay me $1 million to take any of these guys on my team. They're going to ruin it. And number 1 is a guy who's going in the early to mid second round, and he should be going in the 4th round, so make sure you stick around for that. Number 5, Jaden Reed of the Green Bay Packers, currently going at pick 97 on ESPN, 73 on Sleeper, and all the way up at 55 on Underdog Fantasy. I have no problem taking him after pick 85, but when you're drafting him in the 5th or 6th round, he needs to be an every week type of starter for you, and he is way too inconsistent. Head coach Matt LaFleur keeps saying in all of his press conferences that they have 5 wide receivers who can all be starters. And based on how he was playing them and the percentage of snaps each of them got last year, I fully believe him. Jaden Reed is the Deebo Samuel of this team, getting the schemed up touches near the line of scrimmage. Watson is the freak athlete that's going to open up the offense, allowing more deep threat possibilities, but he missed a lot of time last year. Dobbs is the consistent X wide receiver who always gets the hardest assignment versus the best corner. He has to run the toughest routes. Dontavian Wicks was amazing last year and sneakily showed the most upside out of any player on this team. He was a great rookie, but I'll say more about that in my sleepers video. And Bo Melton showed his incredible 4.3 speed towards the end of last year in certain stretches. Reed only played 2 games over 70% snap share last year, and when it really mattered in the playoffs, he played 61% and 44%. Against the Cowboys, he had 0 catches on 3 targets, and versus the 49ers, he had 4 targets for 35 yards. Now, he's a very talented player and does what he's asked to do extremely well, but a guy who's so limited and only plays 60% of snaps just cannot be a 5th or 6th round pick. I think there's too many bodies in that wide receiver room to really carve out that wide receiver 1 role. Number 4 is Keon Coleman of the Buffalo Bills, currently going at pick 70 on Underdog. The coaching staff does not trust him whatsoever. They called him a poor route runner, and right now they said he doesn't even know how to run block. They basically said that in college he was never even taught to do it. And if you're a giant 6'3 wide receiver and want to get snaps on a field, you have to be able to run block. That's easy. His production was not very good in college, and most great draft analysts had him ranked lower than where the Bills actually took him. And I'm someone who tends to stay away from the guys who are not great route runners. I don't like the type of the go up and get it type of receivers. They rely so much on quarterback play. And while Josh Allen's obviously a great quarterback, his best comp is Gabe Davis for that go up and get it type of wide receiver, and we know how inconsistent Gabe Davis is. But at least Gabe Davis can run block. I think the best way to get Keon Coleman on your team is that he's going to start off very slow, and whoever drafts him is probably going to get very annoyed and drop him at some point. Then you go onto the waiver wire and pick him up. If you don't, he's going to be riding your bench for like 10 weeks. Number 3 is Zamir White, going at pick 85 on Sleeper and all the way up at pick 60 on ESPN. This is your very typical trap running back in a congested backfield where we're not really sure who's going to be the starter, but they did just draft Dylan Laube, who's going to take all of the receiving touches. Then they brought in Alexander Madison, not the most talented guy, but neither is Zamir White. Then you factor in how this offense is absolutely horrible, and I don't think they're going to be doing much else than throw Devontae Adams the ball in the red zone. White was not great in his first 2 years in the NFL, barely averaging over 4 yards a carry. He also doesn't have the best vision. They measured his juke rate, which is basically how many evaded or missed tackles do you break, and he only had an 8.4%, which is 55th in the league. His yards created per touch, which factors in what you do after the O-line blocks for you, was 32nd best in the league. So if he's not able to create chances on his own, and he's running behind a bad O-line and a bad offense with a pass-catching running back on his team already, I just don't see the fantasy upside. Number 2 is Zay Flowers, who is currently going at pick 35 on Underdog Fantasy and around 55 on Sleeper and ESPN, which is where he should be going. Off the top of your head, can you remember the best fantasy football finish for a wide receiver under Lamar Jackson in his career so far? Obviously, it's Marquise Brown, but the best finishes were wide receiver 50, wide receiver 47, and wide receiver 22 in his 3 years in Baltimore. This is not a wide receiver-friendly offense. They know what they want to do. They run the ball a lot in the red zone with Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. It used to be Gus Edwards, but now it's going to be Derrick Henry, and then they only throw the ball in the red zone to Mark Andrews. Flowers averaged 17.6 points per game with no Mark Andrews when he had to miss time last year, but a measly 10.2 when they played together. Zay Flowers is a very talented gadget type of receiver like a Deebo Samuel or Jaden Reed, but in this current situation, he's going to be very inconsistent and struggle to score many touchdowns. And before number 1, make sure you're drafting all of your fantasy teams on Underdog Fantasy. I've already drafted over 70 paid leagues. It's so much fun. They have a $15 million tournament called Best Ball Mania where first place gets 1.5 mil. If you want to join with code DNR, they give you $250 to play with. You can find that in my description. Finally, number 1, it's Chris Olave, going at pick 16 on Underdog, pick 19 on Sleeper, and 23 on ESPN. I told you guys last year to avoid him in the late second, so it seems like I hate this guy, but it was completely right. His career is exactly like DJ Moore on the Panthers or like Terry McLaurin on the Commanders. He has the talent to be a top 10 wide receiver, but the situation is so bad. Obviously, Derek Carr is a shell of himself. He's completely washed, but the main problem here is that O-line is completely banged up and ranked 31st or 32nd depending on what site you use. And on top of that, they have arguably the worst coaching staff in the league, guys that are archaic in their designs and only tell Olave to just run straight downfield. They don't scheme him up any open touches, and when you're strictly a deep threat like that, you need the O-line to hold up for your quarterback to actually have time to pass you the ball, which Derek Carr does not have. The Saints are really going to struggle to score the ball again this season. I would be very shocked if Olave had more than 6 touchdowns. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 11, and I cannot see him finishing inside the top 15. He's averaged 13 and 14 15 points per game in his first 2 seasons, I see something very similar. I just made a video about the 5 players you should draft, so go check that out. Leave a like, drop a comment on what you want to see next, and follow for more. Peace.